I'm Lydia Crane. And the night my husband realized I stopped listening was the night he lost everything. He came downstairs expecting obedience, expecting the same quiet routine that had kept him comfortable for years. But when he stepped into the dining room and saw who was waiting at the table, his face turned pale. I didn't speak. Not yet. Silence was the language he had taught me. And now it was the one I used to end him. Marcus blinked as if his eyes were playing tricks. "What is this?" he asked. His voice steady but his jaw tight. Ava lifted her coffee cup, calm and unreadable beside Detective Briggs, while Zach sat stiff in his chair. The folder between them sealed like a verdict. I stirred my coffee once, the spoon clinking against porcelain, and said, "You always wanted people to see how perfect we were. Now they'll see something closer to the truth." His gaze darted from face to face, searching for an exit that didn't exist. He tried a smile, the kind he used on cameras and charity banquets. But it didn't land. "Lydia, whatever this is, it's unnecessary," he said softly. "You're upset. That's all." I watched his reflection tremble in the coffee's dark surface and said, "You're right. I'm upset enough to stop pretending." The silence that followed was heavy, like winter pressing through the windows, each second stretching into proof that he no longer controlled the room. He looked at me then. Truly looked. Realizing the stillness in my posture wasn't submission. "You think you can embarrass me?" he muttered, voice cracking under its own arrogance. I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap, and said quietly, "No, Marcus, I don't have to embarrass you. You already did that yourself." The air shifted, and for the first time in years, I didn't shrink beneath it, I let him drown in it. Traverse always looked peaceful from the outside. The kind of town where people waved from their porches and believed their smiles meant something. Behind our windows, the air felt thinner. Every breath measured like an experiment in control. Marcus liked to say stability was love and structure. But structure was just another word for obedience. I learned that calm wasn't safety, it was surveillance painted in domestic light. He often stood at the window, adjusting the blinds to a perfect angle. His voice smooth as he said, "People respect what they can't see." "Lydia." I nodded the way a person nods when their reflection starts answering for them. The neighbors called our marriage balanced, envied the ease in his laughter, the neatness of our life. They didn't see the way silence echoed louder once the doors closed. Every object in the house seemed chosen for symmetry, as if imbalance could expose him. My clothes, my schedule. Even the way I arranged the mail had invisible boundaries I wasn't supposed to cross. When I moved something, he would tilt his head and say lightly, "I fixed it for you." The sentence always sounded gentle until I realized it erased me. Ava was the only one who looked long enough to notice the cracks. Over lunch one afternoon, she said, "You don't sound like yourself lately." I answered, "Maybe that's the point." Her eyes narrowed as she whispered, "How long do you plan to keep playing steady?" I told her. "I'm not playing steady. I'm studying the storm." The truth was, I'd already started listening to the silence differently. The way someone listens for proof that the glass around them is starting to bend. It started with a hum I couldn't place, a faint electric whisper coming from the living room clock. When I took it down to replace the battery, the back fell open and a small red light blinked once before going dark. My hands didn't shake, but something inside me shifted, like a thread pulled too tight finally snapping. I waited for him to come home, rehearsing calm the way a person practices breathing underwater. When Marcus walked through the door, I asked, "Why is there a camera inside the clock?" He smiled easily, the way people do when they've already written your reaction for you. "Security," he said, shrugging. "I worry when you're here alone." "It's just precaution," I told him. A precaution usually points outward. Not at the person you're married to. Two. He laughed. The sound light but practiced. And said, "You read too much into things." "Lydia, the world isn't out to get you," I replied. I never said it was the world I was worried about. His eyes flickered for a second. Not enough for guilt. Just recognition. That was when I realized the argument was never about truth. It was about control dressed up as care. Later that night, while he slept, I connected the drive to our home network and opened the camera log. Every clip began the same way. Me crossing a room. Me folding laundry. Me moving in spaces that weren't supposed to be observed. No intruders. No evidence of danger. Just my life under silent inspection. I copied everything onto a flash drive, labeling it nothing more than a date. In the morning, Marcus leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand, and said, "You seem tense. Something on your mind?" I said. "You tell me. You've seen everything lately." He paused, smile still fixed. But I could hear the question he wouldn't ask. How much did I know? When he left for work, I stood in the doorway watching his taillights fade. Realizing he didn't need to raise his voice anymore, he'd built a quieter kind of cage. I sat at the table and looked at the clock again. Its face clean and unbothered, ticking in polite rhythm as if it hadn't just betrayed me. In that small sound, I heard the first fracture of the world he tried to script. He thought silence made me pliable. But silence records everything. The shift wasn't in him, it was in the way I started listening. The morning I checked my account, the numbers were gone. My balance, the savings I built piece by piece, had been transferred into the joint fund Marcus controlled. I stared at the screen long enough for the cursor to blink like a warning. The world didn't tilt. It just narrowed. And I understood he'd found a new way to remind me that everything I had still had his name on it. When I told Ava, she said quietly, "It's not theft yet, but it's control." I asked, "What do I even call something like this?" She looked at me without flinching and said, "You call it proof." I wanted to ask how much proof it takes before people stop calling it marriage. But I kept that one to myself. That night, Marcus poured wine and asked, "Rough day?" I said. "You could say that. I lost something." He smiled, all calm performance, and said, "Then it's good you share your life with someone who knows how to keep things safe." I met his eyes and answered, "I guess we'll see what safe means to each of us." The silence after that felt measured, like he was marking the space where my defiance began. Later, an email appeared from an address I didn't recognize. Just 2 words in the subject line, "Still mine." No greeting. No body text. Only a timestamp that matched the moment he'd left the room. I forwarded it to my private folder and typed back one sentence, "Not for long." I didn't send it to him. Only to myself. Because sometimes a message doesn't need a recipient to mean something. The next morning, he lingered by the doorway, pretending to look for his keys. "You seem distant lately," he said. I replied, "You've been watching from every angle. Maybe you can tell me why." His jaw tightened. But he said nothing. Only kissed the top of my head like a man sealing ownership. I let him walk out believing the house still belonged to him, though that belief was the only thing of his I hadn't taken yet. By noon, I had moved everything into a hidden account. A name no one would link to mine. The balance wasn't much, but it was untouched. For the first time in months, something existed outside his reach. He thought power lived in possession, but power was just knowing what to let go of without being seen. Marcus called it a celebration. A casual brunch before his crew's winter training. And I agreed before he could finish the sentence. Ava asked, "You sure you're ready for this?" And I said, "It's not about being ready. It's about being done." She understood without more explanation. We'd already built the plan in silence. I wasn't setting the table, I was setting the stage. That morning, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee, a performance of comfort. When Ava arrived with Detective Briggs, they looked like old friends stopping by. Not the reason the air in that room was about to change. Marcus's footsteps echoed upstairs while Briggs whispered, "He doesn't know yet?" I said. "He never does until it's too late." Ah. Zach showed up last, holding the folder like it burned his hands. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "He's still my supervisor," I told him. He stopped being anyone's supervisor the moment he decided he was untouchable. He nodded once, and the sound of the front door closing behind him felt like a lock turning. When Marcus came down, he smiled at the sight of everyone seated. "Well, this is unexpected," he said lightly. "Am I getting a promotion or an intervention?" I poured him coffee and replied, "Neither. You're getting clarity." His laugh didn't make it to his eyes, and I knew he could already feel the ground thinning under his feet. He reached for a pastry, pretending calm. "You really outdid yourself." "Lydia," he said, "hosting's good for you." I watched his hand hover over the plate as Ava opened the folder. The sound of paper cutting through his sentence. "These are records from your department," she said. "Footage from your own internal server." His fingers froze midair, the smile dying on his lips. He leaned back, voice lower now. "You went through my files? That's illegal," I said. "So is planting cameras in your home, Marcus. So is moving money that isn't yours," Briggs added. "Metadata doesn't lie. You logged in from your work device. We verified the timestamps." He looked from one face to another, realizing no one at that table belonged to him anymore. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of something collapsing without ceremony. I told him, "You always wanted people to see your best side. I guess today they finally will." He didn't answer, only stared at the folder as if it were alive. That was the moment the brunch turned into the reckoning he never saw coming. When the department's car pulled away from the curb that afternoon, Marcus didn't speak. He signed the temporary leave notice with a shaking hand and told Briggs, "This is ridiculous." "It'll clear up by next week," she replied. "You'll have plenty of time to explain when the investigation begins." He slammed the door. But the sound didn't feel like power. It felt like panic pretending to be control. I stayed at the table, wiping the rim of my coffee cup while Ava said, "It's over." "Lydia," I answered. "No. It's starting." She frowned. But I wasn't angry. I was steady in a way that frightened even me. I'd waited so long for silence to work in my favor that the sound of it now felt almost sacred. The next morning, I saw his name on the local news ticker under the words, "Administrative Leave Pending Review." His photo sat beside a headline about internal misconduct and unethical monitoring. Ava called to warn me before I turned on the television. I told her, "He spent years building a hero's face. It was bound to crack." Hey. Marcus showed up outside the gate 2 days later, shouting that it was all lies. "They don't know the truth." "Lydia!" he yelled. I said through the intercom, "They know enough. The rest will come." His voice dropped low, the way it used to when he thought he could will me back. "You can't erase me," he said. And I replied, "I don't have to. You're doing that yourself." Is. At the station, Zach told me that no one in the crew spoke to Marcus anymore. "He's blaming everyone," he said. "Told the captain there's a conspiracy." I asked, "Did anyone believe him?" Zach shook his head and said, "Not after they saw the footage." His words carried the weight of something ending, not with an explosion, but with disbelief slowly turning into disgust. That evening, Ava stopped by with paperwork for the formal complaint. Once you file this, it's public record, she said. I told her. Good. He used the law like armor. I'll use it like air. She smiled faintly, sliding the form across the counter. You've learned his game, she said. I answered. No. I just stopped playing mine. Dana came forward next, trembling as she signed her statement. He told me no one would believe me, she whispered. I said. He tells everyone that. It's how he stays standing. She nodded. And I realized the story was no longer mine alone. It had turned into a pattern unspooling in plain sight. The more truth surfaced, the smaller his legend became. When the official suspension order arrived, Marcus tried to call, but I didn't answer. Ava looked at me and asked, Does it feel like victory? I said. No. It feels like air after smoke. The house stayed quiet that night. The kind of quiet that doesn't threaten but confirms survival. I lay awake knowing the hero they'd once admired had finally run out of places to hide. The courthouse felt smaller than I expected. The kind of room built for order, not truth. Marcus sat across from me. No uniform, no badge. Just a man reduced to silence he didn't control. The clerk read the case number, and the air tightened as if the walls themselves remembered every word he'd used to rewrite me. Ava leaned close and whispered, He looks smaller without the costume, doesn't it? When the judge asked for the first piece of evidence, Ava rose. Your Honor, she said. We submit footage retrieved from Mr. Contact. Crane's department account. The screen flickered to life, showing Marcus drunk in the firehouse locker room, slamming his fist into a locker, shouting inches from a woman's face. The room didn't breathe. Even Marcus stopped pretending to blink. He muttered, This is taken out of context. I said, That's what you told me every time you lied. His attorney tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. Mr. Crane, the judge said. Context doesn't explain patterns. Marcus looked at me then, eyes searching for the version of me that used to apologize. She wasn't there anymore. Then came Dana, her voice shaking but clear. He shoved me into the counter. She said. Told me I was lucky he cared enough to be angry. Marcus whispered. She's exaggerating. And I answered softly. That's what you called survival too. Each sentence she spoke was a fracture in his legend. Each truth another nail in the hero's mask. When Ava presented the logs from the cameras he'd hidden, his face lost color completely. Those were for security. He insisted. You used them to track your wife. The judge replied. You logged in 27 times in 1 week. His silence didn't protect him now. It exposed him exactly the way he'd used it to confine me. The judge turned toward me. Mrs. Crane, why didn't you leave sooner? I met her eyes and said, Because if I left, he'd stay a hero. I wanted people to see who he really was. She nodded once before reading the ruling, a long-term protective order, full removal from his position, and referral for prosecution. When I stepped outside, the cold air cut clean through the noise in my head. Ava said, You did it, I told her. No. I just stopped whispering. The courthouse doors closed behind us. And for the first time in years, the silence that followed didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. The morning after the hearing, I woke before the sun. The house still and waiting. The cracks in the doorframe caught the light, thin and splintered. But I didn't fix them. They were proof of everything that had happened and everything that hadn't broken me. For the first time in years, I felt the quiet without flinching. I made coffee. The smell warm enough to fill the kitchen the way it used to before fear rearranged my days. Ava stopped by, setting her bag on the counter, and asked, You thinking about selling? I said. No, I want to keep it. Let him know I didn't run. She smiled, saying softly, Then this place finally belongs to you. Art. We stood by the window, watching the bay thaw into shifting water. You'll have to get used to peace, she said. I told her. Peace isn't strange. It's just been waiting for me to notice. The truth of it lingered longer than the coffee steam. Heavier, but clean. After she left, I moved the table back to where I always wanted it, centered under the light. I sat there with my cup and whispered. My silence kept me alive. But it doesn't have to define me. Outside, the ice drifted apart into soft, gleaming fragments, and the air smelled faintly of salt and thawing earth. It wasn't victory, I felt it was ownership of my own morning. When the clock struck 9, I opened the window and let the wind through. The house breathed with me. Slow and certain. No hidden cameras. No eyes watching. For years he'd made me live in stillness. But now stillness lived in me differently. It didn't echo his control, it reflected my freedom. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever found yourself silenced, know that quiet doesn't mean defeated. Sometimes it's the pause before power returns. Subscribe. Share your thoughts below. And remember, your voice, even in its calmest form, can still change everything.